It was sort of like live therapy, and I think for the musicians and for the audience.
Rites of Spring at that point threw it all in. I mean, as Rites of Spring were prone to do, there was nothing left. When they left the stage, they were broken, all the instruments were broken, all the mics were broken. It suddenly, it brought the level up. It brought the emotional involvement and engagement up.
The distinctive part of Rites of Spring was Guy's lyrics. He came out of the blue with those lyrics, and I remember listening to. We went in to record the demo, and the first song he sang was "End on End," and by the end of that, you know, I mean, I was shocked because he had never sung in practice. To me, you know, 80 or 90% of the whole Rites of Spring experience is getting this nugget of Guy's genius through a microphone onto tape and out for the world to hear.
People kind of ridiculed those bands to some degree, and they say, "Oh, look, it's emotional hardcore, emo-core."
And I saw Marginal Man early on after I came here. It was clear to me when I was watching them, they were an extremely powerful band. And in a way, you can also see Marginal Man as proto-emo, if you want to use that.
The first band I think about in that period would have to be Marginal Man, because for me, they were really the first band I saw live that just put it all out there. And there was one song they did called Forever Gone about the suicide of a good friend of the guitar players, Pete. The one time I saw them do it, they couldn't finish the song. Pete just collapsed, and that was the end of the set. And that was a really powerful, moment for me, because I realized, like, this is not a joke.
We had to stop playing Forever Gone because Pete would lose it while trying to play that song. And it would take us 10 minutes to put him back together in order to finish the set. And it was too hard on all of us, especially Pete, because he felt that, he lived that. All of our songs we lived.
I mean, it's always rough to watch anyone you know, breaking down. Especially when it's during a song where you already know the words, so you know what it's about, so you know what thoughts are being conjured up.
It was a release. And of course, Brian Baker had to make fun of it. So Brian Baker, I believe he was like, this is like emotional hardcore, emo-core.
At the time, I didn't relate to it. No, I didn't really understand it. I really liked the music, but I just thought all of the ancillary, the posturing, and that expression, I just thought it was kind of, I didn't respond to it. It didn't resonate with me. But also, I'm kind of an uptight wasp, so.
It wasn't a genre back then. It wasn't considered a genre. It wasn't even considered the birth of a genre back then. It was just something that somebody had said sort of in a derogatory way about a band that we were in that was emotionally, exposed on stage pretty often.
Emo. I think the first time I heard someone call it emo was like at an Embrace show where Ian was talking about it. Like, some people call it emo or whatever he said, and I was like, emo? What is that?
Emo core must be the stupidest fucking thing I've ever heard in my entire life. Well, come on, man. But just in case you're wondering, I read in my Thrasher the other day that in fact, what my band, along with other bands in the city, was playing was emo core. I'm thinking emo Phillips, comedian Ian core. Why no, emotional hardcore. As if hardcore wasn't emotional to begin with.
As far as I was concerned, punk had been emotional since day one. I mean, Johnny Rotten was like emotional.
Goodbye to you, my friend. What you had to want for will not. This is rock, you're again, and I almost found myself guessing. Too late, Mike, we're going tonight, so this is the last time. Goodbye to you, my friend.
And there was like a whole new emotional sensitivity, and it was great. Like, you didn't have to sing about fucking Reagan anymore, and you didn't have to fucking, you know, sing about the cops or whatever. It was okay to sing about having your heart broken or whatever it was, you know. And it was inspiring.
I was very happy when things got political. People started growing up a little bit, and the apartheid percussion protests were definitely the first stage of that.
Yeah, so somewhere along the way, myself and Chris Bald and a couple other cats during that era were saying there's got to be something that we can do, you know. So we just said, well, I know one thing we can do. We can make some noise. We're a bunch of punk rockers, man. We can make some noise. So we just kind of put the word out there and said, they'd be protesting on Massachusetts Avenue all the time, man. We should just come out with some drums and some hubcaps and some bells, anything we can find to make noise.
The protests outside of the South African embassy were really the beginning of like a political awakening in the scene. And it was around that time that Mark Anderson, who had started an organization called Positive Force, really started to get some traction in the local scene.
Positive Force was actually a really good addition and brought an organization to an otherwise disparate kind of community by making shows that benefited the homeless or food for the poor or whatever. They actually were able to take this disparate energy, bring it together, and send it back out into the community in a productive way.
The fact that they exposed the community to so many important problems of the era and of the era still is, I think, really something that's valuable. And the way it functioned in DC, again, is really just because we had the backdrop of these government structures in our city.
Listen to my rebellion chant. I feel goodwill for all mankind.
And Mark was really committed, you know, I mean, he was really passionate. You had to give him credit. He would get up on stage before every Positive Force benefit. You know, he would talk before the show to let people know why they were there. The first couple times I saw him do that, it was a little uncomfortable because people at that point weren't used to having, you know, someone up on stage telling them, you know, anything about politics, let alone social issues, whatever.
They will help you get closer to the truth, and I think that's what we want. We want the truth, we don't want a bunch of fucking lies.
And so it became a large number of the shows were Positive Force shows. And it was, on the political side, that was both good because there was some cool stuff happening and there was some good information. On the flip side, you know, sometimes I think that the information took center stage over the shows.
I remember on this 3 record that has the pink triangle, silence equals death, you know, people weren't talking about AIDS like that then, you know. I mean, that was not a thing that was in the mass media, but you could go to a show and get a pamphlet about it and kind of get hipped to a lot of this stuff. And, you know, they really were able to tap into what was happening at that moment.
And the reality of AIDS is that thousands of people are dying. There are ways for those people, for all of us, not to die. One of them is to start taking the whole thing very seriously.
Not all clubs allowed you to do all ages shows, and they put on shows at least once a month, it seemed like. So it was a place where a lot of people could play. But I think it maybe became a little too codified.
I sometimes felt like the political nature of shows, for me, did sometimes become kind of feeling a bit constricting.
You know, I didn't understand why our band, just because we were a DC band, needed to be associated with something that, you know, we didn't sign up for.
The positive force thing kind of wasn't on my radar because I was, Diagnosty was about being a national act. I mean, the first thing, before our record even came out, we had booked our first tour and we were going out with the Descendants on the Enjoy tour. So I was like, not really concerned about what was happening here at home. I was like, later, nerds.
I'm irresponsible and I'm irrational. It's irreversible. What are you gonna do?
I just didn't know why, you know, we had to go back to the 60s and have it be a movement for something, for good causes. You know, yeah, I'm a bad punker.